Oh my gosh. Okay. So excited for this conversation. So applicable in so many ways. So let's dive in. Basically, today we are going to talk about how ease is different than easy. I could not believe in this more. I feel like I've been saying this for years, but I feel like it's a really good point to kind of revisit it in terms of, well, 2020, but also just to give like more context. And I really want to have just like a practical conversation around this. And I also want to talk about why it can be frustrating, how to make it less frustrating, all the things. So this is something that has been like a tenet, I guess, of a lit up life and of client teachings for years, because I think that there is a very, very big difference between something that is easy and something that has ease. And I think business is rarely all that easy, but I think it can be very full of ease. And finding that differential is really important, because if not, you will make yourself wrong all the time, right? If you think that everything in your business should be really easy, you're going to feel stuck a lot. You're going to make yourself wrong a lot. You're going to chase different strategies and techniques a lot, and it will be very frustrating. But if you realize that ease doesn't mean different tasks, it means a different mindset, a different way of showing up, that's when the tables start to turn. That's when things get easier and easier. It's not about changing the tasks until you find an easy one. It's about changing the mindset so you bring more ease to all the things you're doing. It's also why it gets super frustrating when you hear a lot of people online being like, easy, it's so easy, it's so easy, it's so easy. Because you're like, well, shit, this task does not feel easy for me. What am I doing wrong? And again, I think we're confusing definitions. And that's why I'm constantly saying ease is different than easy, because it doesn't mean the task always feels easy, but it means there is ease in doing it, which is both a mindset thing and a practical thing. So we're going to talk about all that. If you're here, say hi. Tell me if there's any questions you have around this or anything that you want me to dive into, particularly around this. Hi, Courtney. Thanks for being here. Okay, cool. So, hey, Kristen. All right. So here's the thing. This is the first thing that I want to talk about, is that yes, running a business that you love should feel awesome, should make you feel lit up, all these good things, right? But at the end of the day, it is still a job and you are still running a business. I feel like that conversation has come up so often with clients recently, from clients that are just starting out to clients that have been in business a long time and are making a ton of money. I literally just got off the phone with one of my clients who she's already like made nearly 500K this year, is killing it in business, and sometimes just really makes herself wrong for feeling like it is a job, right? And it is. Like, I think that that is such a recognition that is so important here. We're like, yes, it is not always going to feel easy, because it is still work. There is still effort associated with that, right? Like, everything is going to feel harder than watching Netflix all day, right? Everything, especially when you consider it's not only a job, but it's like a business that you own. There's so much uncertainty in what's going on, right? But like, it's still a job. That is important to recognize, right? I think that we can get so far away from that. I actually shared something on Instagram the other day, and this guy, I think he's a comic writer, and he kind of wrote the same thing, and he said it super eloquently, but he was basically saying like, there are a lot of days where he loves what he does, but it's still work. And the love of what he does is what gets him through the times where it still feels like work. But if you are thinking that it should never feel like work, that's when you're going to miss out. That's when you're going to lose like your craft. That's when you're going to start making yourself wrong and feel like maybe I'm not on the right path. And it's total bullshit, right? Like, I love a lit up life so much. It's like hard for me to even put in words. I will probably start crying if I try. And most days it still is work. It's still a job. Like, I still have to show up at certain times and do certain things. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Nothing. But that's where I think ease and easy gets confused, because we think easy means it never, ever, ever feels like work and it never, ever takes energy to show up. That's not true. Ease is very present though every day for me, because I know I am going to show up. I know I'm intentional about how I show up. I know this is an active choice. I know this is what I want to be doing. I know I love what I'm doing. So in a sense, there's so much ease with it. And it doesn't mean that on like Monday at 5, I wouldn't rather be on the couch, you know, like watching Married at First Sight. I would. That would be easier. Let's be honest. But there is ease in knowing that I will always show up for this live stream anyway. Like that's not a question for me anymore, right? Hi, Jen. Thank you for being here. Does anyone else watch Married at First Sight, by the way? That's a total aside. If you're listening and watch that, will you please tell me? Because I like need people to talk to about this. But yeah, like, do you see that differential? Like this is still work, right? I'm not saying I don't love it and don't enjoy it, but like, if we're going to compare, would it be easier to be sitting on the couch right now? Of course it would. That's way fucking easier than being like, well, what am I going to say? And all this stuff, right? But doesn't mean there's not ease, right? But like, the thing to remember too is that practically most tasks aren't that hard, right? Like the actual task of being live right now is so simple. Like I decide to do it. I schedule it in my calendar. I hit go live on my computer and I talk to you, right? So I can feel a ton of ease with this task. But like if it's a Monday and I'm tired or I had a long day, or, you know, say Kenny's off work and I want to hang out with him or whatever, is it always 100% easy to show up? Of course not. But again, there's so much ease in knowing I'll do it anyway. So that's where we come to that. It's that self-trust that creates ease. And it's also habits that create ease, right? So that's super important, because for me, let's just define things. Oh, Jen, you haven't heard of it? It's really terrible reality TV in many ways, but it's so good. So the premise is these people basically are matched by like a panel of experts and literally get married at first sight. Like the first time they meet is at the altar, and then it like films them for 8 weeks after that. It's on Lifetime. It's very good. It's also on Hulu, I think. Anyway, if you've watched that, let me know. Or if you have questions, let me know. Hi, Belinda. Hi. Okay, so ease or easy, I think, is more of that like in the moment task. Do you know what I mean? Like easy means like it's so easy to do that in the moment thing. And I think that's rare in business. I think there are rarely things that feel easier than not working, sitting on the couch, things like that, right? It's always easier to just be like sitting on your couch, to be honest, right? Like that's not a thing. Ease means long-term there's ease, right? In knowing you'll show up, knowing what you're doing, knowing what you want to do, even and especially when it's not easy. Do you see the difference there? Where like, I feel like easy is really like, does this feel like the easiest thing I can do in this moment? And rarely will that be true in business. But if there's a connection to ease, because it's like, if I know that I'll show up when it's not the easiest thing in the moment, that's when I create so much ease and so much self-trust, because I know I'll show up. I know I'll do the thing. I know that even when it would be easier to go hang out with Kenny or sit on the couch, like I have ease in trusting myself to show up at 5 o'clock on Mondays every week, like 4 years, right? And I think that that's where people get confused when they hear people that are, you know, a lot further along than them in business talking about this, because they think like, oh, well, it's so easy for them, I must be missing something. And it's like, no, they've had a long time of cultivating self-trust and habits along the way, right? Hi, Janelle. Janelle says, I have been binging on your podcast and I was inspired to create myself a color-coded spreadsheet I have called Consistency Calendar to help make it easy to show up consistently. Oh my God, I love that. That's amazing, Janelle, right? And I think the thing there is like, you just created ease for yourself, right? So there is ease because you know how you need to show up. It's on a spreadsheet. There's no like mind drama around it. Will it always be easy to show up for that calendar, right? Like on a Tuesday at 2 when you're tired or something? Probably not. But is there ease in the having the calendar? And then if you can trust yourself to show up anyway, yes, right? Sarah and I were talking about this today a little bit about how trusting yourself to show up and adapt is kind of like the magic of everything in business, because everything gets simple once you do that. Everything feels more full of ease once you do that. When you don't have that, or when you don't trust yourself to keep showing up, even when things get hard, even when they don't work out how you want it to, even when you feel like you failed or whatever, there is still ease to that. Even in the failures, there is ease, because you'll keep going, you'll keep showing up, you'll keep adapting, right? And so you're not constantly asking the question over and over, right? Like, is this going to work? Should I do this? Should I do that? Like, it's not like this constant mind game you're playing with yourself. It's like, I will always show up. I will always do the thing. I will always adapt. And again, that's why people that have been in business for a long time talk so much about ease. It's not because every task feels easy for them. It's because they've built up enough evidence over time that they can trust themselves. They've built habits over time that they can lean into, right? And so if you're at the beginning and every single thing feels hard, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean you're getting it wrong. It means you haven't fully built that self-trust yet. You haven't fully built that evidence yet. And you probably haven't made it all habits. Like, again, let's use this example of today's live stream. I've been showing up Mondays at 5 for years. I don't know how many, probably at least 2 or 3 at this point. I don't know. I was certainly doing videos before that, but like in terms of like a consistent every Monday at 5, probably at least 2 or 3 years, if not more. That's what ease looks like, right? Or like, the difference I see in my clients who are like launching a podcast for the first time versus clients who have had a podcast for months or even years. The ease level is different, right? And it doesn't mean that the people who have had it for a long time feel like every podcast recording is so easy. It's just that there's ease, there's habit, there's self-trust, there's evidence, right? And all of that makes the biggest difference. But to turn it to the practical, let's see what Jen said. Jen said, creating that ease has been an awesome lesson for me to learn. Absolutely. And I think that it's so interesting, Jen, and I would be curious what you think about this, but I think it's so interesting to separate out, like, did you used to feel like it should be easy? Because I feel like most business owners have felt like that at a certain point where like you're making yourself wrong because it should be easy versus like easy is like that in the moment thing. Tell me what you think about that. But to take it to a practical step, that's why I'm also such a big encourager of doing the same tasks over and over again in your business, because I really feel like that's what brings ease. Like, I always joke that I bought ease in my business, not only because I hire and delegate, but because I did the same tasks over and over enough to bring me ease, right? So like, I put in the work, like I bought it, you know what I mean? Because again, like, ease comes from that self-trust, that evidence, and that habit. And so where a lot of entrepreneurs get stuck and never feel ease is they're always bouncing around. You guys know I've done countless live streams on that, so I won't harp on that too much here, except to say that practically speaking, that is where ease falls off. Because if you're always redoing a new thing, you never get to that point of ease, right? Because you're like always starting a new strategy, always reinventing the wheel. And so, yeah, like the ease isn't present because you haven't had the chance to get there. Like, again, ease is present for me with this live stream because I've had years under my belt. And I'm not necessarily saying you need years, but if from week to week, your strategies, your tasks, your focus is changing, I guarantee you business will not feel easeful at all, right? And you'll make yourself wrong for it constantly. And when you make yourself wrong for it, what you'll do is chase the next thing, chase the next thing, chase the next thing. And it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy where you're trying all these new things to create ease, but ease is created in doing the same thing again and again, right? So I think I said this at the beginning, but most people think that, creating ease means doing a different task that feels easier. And really it means cultivating a different mindset, i.e. the self-trust, i.e. the evidence and the habit, right? So really coming back to that permission to do the same thing over and over again, to get better and better at it, to trust yourself to do that. Like, I feel like that's something I work with my clients on all the time, is like, okay, so either this task worked and then we got that data from it, or this task didn't work quite how we wanted to, and then we got the data on how it didn't work, and then we can tweak it from there. But it doesn't mean that we constantly change the thing, right? We test and tweak along the way. And the more you test and tweak, the more ease you're creating over time, right? So ease is very much a state of mind, but it's also very practical in the do the same thing over and over again stance. Like, I think I talked about in another live stream, like, one of the magical pieces of a lit up life is it's actually super fucking boring in terms of like what I need to do every day. Like, I'm doing a lot of the same things for literally years. Like, I've had this group since I started my business like 5 years ago. I've probably been on video once a week for those 5 years. Like, my podcast now I've had for probably at least a year and a half, a year, something like that. I think we started in March. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But like, that is what creates that ease, is that we're doing the same thing again and again, right? So if you are someone who has been in business for a while and just feels no ease around anything that they're doing, like, that's the first checkpoint, is practically, am I doing the same things enough to create ease around it, to create that self-trust that I'm going to show up for it, to create the habit, right? Belinda says the first major thing I did, which created ease, was deciding my business was going to work no matter what, no quitting. 100%. It's that self-trust, right? So you like decided on that big level, like, I trust myself to show up for this until it works no matter what. I feel like almost every single client I've had that has like really created that success, that result, has made that decision, right? That's where ease really comes from, is that you're gonna keep showing up and you don't have to keep redeciding that every day. And then if you add on top of that, not only do I know I'm going to keep showing up and I don't have to redecide that, what if you added, and I know how I'm going to show up and I don't even have to redecide that? Now we're talking ease, right? That's when you get into the, wow, I'm doing the same thing week after week and I just totally trust myself to show up for it. Wow, I'm building habits so it doesn't even feel like it's hard to do the same thing week over week. Wow, I can see how even when it would be easier to sit on the couch, I'm still choosing to do this thing because now it's a habit. Now I trust myself. Now I feel that momentum. Like, this is how great sustainable businesses are built. And it's not the sexiest, funnest thing, as much as it feels sexy and fun to kind of like chase different strategies. And maybe this will be the one that's easier. Like, it's fun in the moment, but over time, it's really, really hard to sustain and you never really get to ease. So this is like the kind of like less than sexy thing, but ultimately returns the biggest results over time. Let's see. Yes, that's so true. Janelle says no plan B. Exactly. Hi, Sherry. Sherry says, do you have a process that you walk yourself through to decide the first strategy that you then repeat and create consistency around? In your case, choosing to do live streams over other audience building strategies. Yeah, I mean, listen, Sherry, I think that, there's some different things that go into that. I mean, I think it's just like, what do you enjoy the most? I think it's also like, what does your audience prefer the most? And then I think it's like stacking strategies on top of that, right? So it doesn't mean like, because I pick live stream that I'm never going to do anything else. Like, I've done a podcast now, I've done 2 podcasts, I do content every day, all this kind of stuff. So I would definitely watch last week's live stream too, where I talk about stacking strategies versus shifting, because I think that will be really helpful too. Because sometimes when we feel like, oh my God, now I have to pick and I have to like do that thing consistently, it creates a lot of tension because we feel like we're almost like picking for eternity or something, versus realizing like, I'm just picking the bottom layer of the stack. And then once I get that on lock, I'm just going to add something to it. So whether I picked podcast or a live stream or content, written content, or a Facebook group or whatever, I'm really just picking that first layer. So you don't want to necessarily put so much charge around it. You want to be like, my goal is to pick that first layer, get really good and create a ton of ease around it. Then the second layer can be the next thing. So eventually you'll get to the point where you have a lot of different strategies going in business and they all have ease to them, instead of like what I talked about last week, like shifting all over the place or putting a ton of pressure on just one of them. You really want to stack them. So I would think about it like that. And again, like that is where ease comes in, right? Where each time you put a strategy down, or each time you stack a strategy, you're finding a way to create ease in that. And so ease, again, meaning you have that self-trust, you fully trust yourself to show up for it. You fully embody it, right? You create a habit around it and let that kind of give you evidence along the way. So the evidence, the habit, and the self-trust, I think, is ultimately what creates it. I remember one of my clients, I remember saying to her at one point when she was just having like a really hard time in her business and was like just putting a ton of things in place initially. And I said to her, like, I promise it really does get easier over time. You really will feel so much more ease as you grow. And she always reflects back to me how that was like such an offhand comment, but it was like one of the most impactful things for her, because it like occurred to her like, oh, this could feel different. Like it's not always going to feel so intense if I keep doing the same thing and I keep cultivating that self-trust. It truly can have ease to it. And now she has an amazing business now. She has a ton of ease. But like hearing that in that moment was so important, because I think that sometimes when we're at this place in our business where everything feels hard and we hear people talking about ease, it feels like so far off that we almost can't even conceptualize it. And it feels like we're doing something wrong. But when we can see like, yeah, anytime you're starting something for the first time, there won't be a ton of ease to it, because we need to cultivate that self-trust, that habit, and that evidence. But if you do that enough, everything starts to flow in a different way. So it's like not making yourself wrong. Like when I started writing content, it wasn't like there was like a ton of ease to it. But now, years later, it's like one of the easiest things I do in my business, right? So it's really just remembering that and seeing that over time. And that's why that stacking helps too, because you're building up the evidence over time as well. You're building up the habits, you're building up the self-trust, versus if you're always shifting, you don't necessarily get those in. You don't necessarily create a habit. You don't necessarily get a lot of self-trust built in. You don't necessarily create a lot of evidence, right? So it really is a mindset game as much as it is a practical game. Sherry says, yes, it feels heavier because I feel like I'm picking the first layer in the stack, right? So just remembering that like there's not a lot of pressure about picking the right thing, right? It's like whatever you pick is fine, because you're just going to add to it. So whether you pick podcasts now and live streams later or vice versa or whatever, like I wouldn't make that too important. It's really just like they're all eventually going to be in the stack, right? So another thing that I really want to do is just give you guys a couple examples. So one example of this that I see with clients constantly is in launches. So almost everyone that launches for the first time does not feel ease. Good news, bad news, I guess, right? You're not doing it wrong if you didn't feel ease the first time. And also if you're about to do it, sorry, you might not feel ease. But when my clients are launching things for the second, third, fourth, fifth time, they're creating so much ease every time. Again, self-trust, habit, evidence, right? So, but you have to get through that first time to get to ease. And where this online space kind of fucks with our head sometimes is we're like, oh my God, that first time did not feel easeful. I must be doing something wrong, back to the drawing board. No, that first time didn't feel easeful because you didn't have any of those things cultivated. But the next time, and the time after that, and the time after that, it's only going to get better. It's only going to get more easeful, right? And that's what like so many people comment on. Like I remember one of my clients recently just did like launched a program for the second time, I guess. And she said to me like, oh my God, why don't people talk about this more? Like, this is so much better. Like, this is amazing. All this stuff done. There's so much ease here, all this stuff. And she was just like, her mind was like exploding at how much more easeful this launch was compared to the first one, right? And so just remembering like it gets easier. You're not doing it wrong. Again, it's a job and it's new, right? Like the first time you went into a day job that you had and you trained for the first 2 weeks, of course it felt harder than when you had that job for 5 years. Like business is the same. Like we have to stop making easy or ease about the task. It's not. It's about that self-trust. It's about that habit. It's about doing the same thing again and again and building that evidence. But we're so quick to make it wrong that I see so many people never get to the second launch, never get to the third launch because they think it's wrong. But again, like it's a fucking job. Yes, the first 2 weeks of any job are going to be harder the first time you do anything new, right? Like I remember when I got promoted, my first 2 weeks as like a manager of a big team were like the hardest 2 weeks ever. It got easier. That's how business is, right? Yes, Janelle said it's true. Launches are like the little mind-blowing thing, right? But definitely does get easier. Exactly. So that's a huge one. Another one is like sharing your truth for the first time versus getting in the habit of always doing it. So like a lot of my clients, when they come to me and they're like having to like kind of like, you know, be vulnerable, be real, be authentic online for the first time, it's literally the hardest, right? It's like, you know, like you just want to throw up the whole time or whatever kind of thing, right? But once you've been doing that for a little bit online and like you're used to sharing like that, you've created the self-trust that you can do that. You've built up evidence that like people don't attack you and it's mostly fine. And you've gotten in the habit of thinking through that lens and writing through that lens. You don't even think about it anymore. It just gets really, really easeful. Again, different than easy. Like on a Tuesday, is it the easiest thing to sit here and write and tap into my vulnerability and da da da? Not always. Like I'm sure it would be easier if I was like walking my dog or hanging out or whatever, but there's still so much ease around it because of those three things, right? So that's another one too, where like we always think it's going to be as hard as it is initially, and it never is. So if you're like, oh my God, sharing is feeling just excruciating for me right now, that's okay. But like keep going because ease is on the other side of that, right? Another one that I hear all the time from clients is follow-ups. So if you guys have been following me for any length of time, you know I'm like the biggest believer ever in follow-ups. So ease versus easy, right? Like short-term follow-ups, like for example, like on Friday, I'm supposed to follow up. Like that can feel so not easy. That can feel, you know, like really intense, really like, oh my God, are they going to think I'm pushy? Are they going to, but ease comes from like, I have a follow-up process. I always follow it. I always follow it no matter what. It always looks the same. And I've been doing this enough times that I have the self-trust that I'll follow up and follow the process no matter what. I have the evidence that it works and it does get me clients and people don't like think I'm awful. And I've gotten into a habit where every Friday I do that follow-up. That is ease, you guys. I'm not saying on Friday at 4, when you have that plan, that it feels like the easiest task in the world. It might not. I don't know, right? But I'm saying that if you do those things over time, ease is present. And again, where we lose that in business is when we're like, well, maybe I'll follow up this week. Maybe next week I won't. Then I have to get restarted. Then I'm like reworking my follow-up process for the 100th time or whatever. Yeah, like ease is absent, right? Don't make it wrong if it doesn't feel easy on Friday at 4. But if you do it enough, it should create a ton of ease where you're not questioning it. You're not thinking about it. You're not worried about it. You're just sitting down and mostly doing the task. It does not mean that you wouldn't rather be watching Married at First Sight if you're anything like me, but you're still going to do it. And there's ease to just knowing you're going to show up and do it, right? What else do I have here? I'm always trying to give examples because I feel like it's so much harder. to just conceptualize it sometimes. Oh, another one was podcasts. So I personally have two. I've walked a lot of clients through them, and like the intensity of creating and launching a podcast usually doesn't feel all that useful for most people. There's a lot of moving parts. There is a lot you have to think through. It's a whole new level of visibility and vulnerability and all of these things, right? So what some people do is they make that indicative of the whole process, and they get really freaked out that having a podcast is going to be this like very hard and heavy thing and all this stuff, right? But if they remember, like, oh, short term, anything new is not going to be full of ease, but long term, when I'm like recording that 40th episode or whatever it is, there's going to be so much ease to this process if I let myself keep going, if I build the self-trust, if I create the habit, and if I get the evidence along the way. But you can see how like sometimes doing that initial thing, we project that out onto the future. So we're like, oh my God, if it was this hard to launch it, I can't imagine, right? But that's not true. Ease is on the other side of that. Again, just like if you started a new job and you had to learn all this new stuff for a few weeks, yeah, it would be hard, and ease would be on the other side of that. So really thinking about that with things like launches, visibility, launching a podcast, following up, all that kind of stuff. Like, do not get it twisted that it should always feel easy. But if you keep at it, if you keep doing the same thing, ease will be present. If you stop a lot, if you shift strategies a lot, if you're always looking for the task that should be easy, you will be frustrated AF, and you will feel like ease is constantly evading you in your business. But if you look at most business owners who are talking about ease, I would be willing to almost guarantee you that if you looked at their product suite and strategy, it's because they're replicating the same thing again and again, whether that's a launch model, whatever, like selling one-on-one, selling products, like they're replicating a similar business model over and over. And that's why they've created ease. And what they have to do to replicate that same business model over and over is stack strategies, right? But fundamentally, they have to trust themselves. They have to trust that that's working. They have to believe that even if something didn't work, they're going to figure it out and fix it, right? They have to build evidence over time that like, yeah, we're going to keep doing this thing. It's working when we show up like this, and they're going to make it a habit, right? So if you can look at those things, you can literally manufacture ease, right? Like, I think that we think that it's this thing that we have or we don't. Like, the task is either easy for me or it's not. That's not a thing, right? I'm either going to do the task enough that I create ease, or I'm not, and I'm going to go find another task I want to create ease around. But it's not this thing that like you have it or you don't have it. It's like this thing that you build. It's kind of, again, like why I say like I've bought ease in my business, because I've invested into it enough to get there, right? So I think that's just really, really helpful to see. And that's why it's almost entirely a mindset game, because anyone can go like, okay, I'll show up and post daily and do 2 videos per week. But it can feel so hard to do that if you're expecting all of that to be easy, right? Because then we make ourselves wrong that it doesn't feel easy. On when I'm supposed to do that video, it's not feeling easy, right? But the truth is, if you can build that self-trust to do it even and especially when it doesn't feel easy, that's when everything changes and ease is present, right? Belinda said, I've become a selling ninja because I have created ease in knowing I serve my peeps. I used to be terrified of it. So good, Belinda. That thrills me, right? And you've built it. Like, I think that's so important. Again, like some people can be like, oh, it's either easy for me to sell or it's not. No, you have built that over time, right? And I think like the biggest takeaway, I feel like I've probably said this twice, but I'm going to say it again because I think it's really important, is that if you can build the self-trust to do it, even and especially when it doesn't feel easy, that's how you create ease, right? We're all waiting around for that moment where it feels easy to do something and then going, God, I have no ease. What's wrong? But it's like the ease is on the other side of doing something even when it doesn't feel easy. right? Like the selling. You had to do it even when it felt hard so that now you can have ease. I had to show up on video even when it felt hard. So now there's so much ease in showing up here every Monday, right? Yes. And Belinda said totally took time, 100%. And that's that gap where most of us don't want to wait. We're like, where is my ease now? Like, right? We're like, on Monday at 5, it should feel easy for me to show up. No, like on Monday at 5, it feels easy for me to show up because I've been doing it for a really long time. Totally different. You have to give yourself that time for ease to build. But if you do, and if you do the things, even and especially when they're not easy, it will build and you will create a business full of ease. A Lit Up Life it is so easeful for me right now. And I say that without hesitation or reservation because I have fully bought that by showing up and doing the hard things again and again until I created ease around them, by doing the same thing for literally years, by doing the same thing over and over again, by not making up stories that it should feel hard or that I'm not doing it right or that because it doesn't feel easy, I need to change strategy. No, same shit over and over again. Stacking strategies, proving that I can trust myself, doing it even when it didn't feel easy. And that's how I got here. So I feel like it's just so important to share that context because I feel like so many of my clients come to me thinking like, damn, like a lot of things do not feel easy. I must be doing it wrong. And then when they hit that point where it's like, oh, it's clicking, like this is ease, this is what it feels like, they're having those realizations of like, I could not stand everyone talking about ease. And now I get it. Now I'm one of those people talking about ease, right? And so many of my clients have those moments, have those realizations. But the online space gets so like, you know, like all or nothing about it, where it's either like you're a good business owner if you have ease, or like you're a bad business owner if that's all you're talking about. Like we just get so divisive, right? And I think the point of this is I wanted to really give you context where like if it doesn't feel, you know, full of ease at the beginning, great, it doesn't for any of us. But you can create it and build it over time. And that's why a lot of the people that you're seeing talking about ease and saying how building their business has so much ease to it, like they're not lying either, but it doesn't mean it was ever not, that it wasn't ever hard for them. You just almost forget. Like I kind of forget how hard it was for me to get on video at one point because there's so much ease around it right now. But I can tell you for sure that it was hard. You just kind of like lose touch with that a little bit, right? Over time, because there is so much ease around it. But almost everyone that has had that had a point where it didn't feel easy. So permission for it not to feel easy, but to know that ease is on the other side of that. Sherry says, Belinda, I feel that my first fundraising call felt so nerve-wracking for the first time. Nonprofit actually prepared me for selling in business. I did it so much that I had to shift my feelings about it, and now there's no negative charge. So good, Sherry. And I think that's, again, exactly it. Like, you shifted the mindset, you did it enough, right, to create that self-trust and that habit. And now it's just like a thing you can do. And I think that's so beautiful when you see how like, oh, I literally created the ease, right? Janelle says, I love and appreciate that you simply maybe say it. There are so many different things people say you must simplify it. Thank you. There are so many different things people say you must do. Yeah, they are often contradictory, but you make it all simplified. Thanks, Janelle. Yeah, totally. I'm like not a big believer in like there's one way, one thing, must do, whatever. It's like, do one thing, create a bunch of ease around it, do another thing, create a bunch of ease around it, stack those, and you're gonna grow. Like that's the whole game. And you know, making that the priority too. Like I think that's another thing that I just want to say on this is like, is ease in your business your priority? Like for me, it was one of my highest priorities. Like I'm not trying to feel stressed out all the time. I'm a control freak and have had anxiety and depression. Like I'm not trying to create a business that contributes to that. So I really made ease a priority. That might have meant that I chose to grow slower in certain ways, or I chose to pick one strategy and stick to it for a period of time before I created ease and moved on to another. And so it's taken, you know, some patience there and stuff, but that is a huge, 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 huge priority in my business. So bringing the intention to it and knowing that you actually mean to create ease, that you want to create ease, that you're intentionally making decisions to do that is really, really important too. Ease does not just happen to you. Like it's not an accident. It's not like you're like, oh, that's so funny, I had no idea. Now it just is so easeful. Like it happens because you're intentionally trying to create it by doing the same thing, testing and tweaking, building that self-trust, building that evidence. Like that's where it comes from, right? So give yourself that permission, give yourself that, opportunity basically to really go after ease in your business, because it is a it is a thing you can manufacture and create. So I hope that was helpful. I'm so grateful to you guys for coming and for watching. If you have any questions on this, let me know. If you are wanting to work with me to create more ease in your business, I currently have a wait list, and I also have, if you're on the wait list, basically you get to submit questions to me every month. I make videos, you get to watch the videos and watch all the previous month's videos. So anyway, I'm like so bad at explaining it. It's basically like a little mini membership site. So if you are thinking about getting one-on-one support, if you know ease is a priority for you, get on the wait list, submit your questions to me, allow me to support you in the meantime, be the first to know when one-on-one opens. And again, just thank you guys for being here. I'll drop the link. It's alituplife.com/waitlist. I love you all. I appreciate you. And I hope you have a beautiful week. Bye, guys.